The morning mist had not yet lifted from Ashwick Hollow when Elira Vance stood before the council table and said the words that would change her life forever. "Send me instead of my brother." The room fell silent. Old Councilman Reyes, a man who had buried 2 sons in the last border war, looked at her with something between pity and relief. For 3 generations, the human town of Ashwick Hollow had lived beside the wolf kingdom of Blackthorn Ridge in a truce so fragile that a single spark could burn it to ash. That spark had come 2 nights ago, when a border patrol clashed with wolf soldiers, and her younger brother Tomas had been named among those responsible. The Blackthorn court had offered a way to avoid war: a marriage. One human bride, sent across the border, to bind the 2 kingdoms together in blood and promise. The council had already chosen Tomas's fate as a hostage to appease the Alpha King. Elira could not let that happen. Tomas was barely 20, gentle and frightened, with a new wife of his own waiting at home. Elira had no husband, no children, nothing to lose but herself. "You understand what you are offering," Reyes said quietly. "The Alpha King is not known for mercy." "I understand," Elira answered, though her heart pounded so hard she feared the whole room could hear it. "I am a healer's daughter. I know how to endure pain that isn't mine to escape." 3 days later, she rode through the gates of Blackthorn Ridge in a plain gray dress, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. The castle rose before her, like something carved from the mountain itself, dark stone against a gray sky, banners bearing a black wolf snapping in the wind. She had expected cruelty. She had expected cold eyes and colder words. What she found instead, when she was finally brought before King Draven Ashgrave, was silence. He was taller than she imagined, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of a winter forest. He did not smile. He did not scowl either. He simply watched her, as though searching her face for something he already expected to find. "You are not the one I was told to expect," he said finally. "I volunteered in my brother's place," Elira answered, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "If that displeases you, I am still willing to serve the peace however you require." Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to name. "It does not displease me," he said. "Come, the wedding will be held before sundown. There is no reason to delay what must be done." The ceremony was brief, formal, and utterly without warmth. Elira stood beside a stranger and repeated vows she barely understood, her mind numb with the speed of it all. That night, alone in a grand chamber with silk sheets and a fire she hadn't asked for, she allowed herself to cry for the first time since leaving home. She told herself it did not matter. She had not come here for love. She had come to buy her brother's life and her town's safety, and if that meant living out her days as a stranger in her own marriage, then so be it. But the days that followed did not unfold the way she expected. On her 3rd morning in the castle, a servant arrived with a pot of chamomile tea, the exact blend her mother used to make when Elira couldn't sleep. She had mentioned it once, in passing, to no one but the guard who had escorted her from the gate. She hadn't thought Draven had even heard the story. A week later, she found that the guard assigned to walk with her through the castle gardens was not some junior soldier, as she'd assumed, but Kale, the king's most trusted commander, a wolf so respected that even the court elders lowered their voices around him. When she asked why, Kale only said, "The king does not send lesser men to guard what matters to him." Elira did not know what to do with that sentence. She turned it over in her mind for days. Draven was not what the rumors claimed. The court whispered of a ruthless commander, a king who had crushed 3 rebellions without blinking, a man too hardened for gentleness. But in the quiet hours, when the castle slept and Elira wandered the library unable to rest, she would sometimes find him there too, a book open on his lap, firelight catching the sharp lines of his face. He would look up when she entered, and instead of dismissing her, he would gesture to the chair across from him. "You don't sleep either," he said one night, not quite a question. "I'm not used to silence this loud," she admitted. "At home, there was always something. My mother's patients arriving before dawn, my brother arguing with someone about nothing. Here, it's too still." Draven considered this. "I will have someone bring music to your wing, if that would help." "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said simply, and returned to his book. It became a habit, those quiet nights. She learned that he read history not for strategy, but because he found comfort in knowing that hard things had been survived before. She learned that he took his tea black and bitter, the opposite of hers, and that he always paused before answering a difficult question, as though weighing every word for the damage it might cause. She learned that beneath the crown and the reputation was a man who carried some private weight she couldn't name, something that made him watch her sometimes, with an intensity that had nothing to do with politics. The incident with Lord Merrick was what finally cracked the wall between them. It happened at a council dinner, weeks into her new life at Blackthorn Ridge. Merrick, a courtier known for his sharp tongue, made a comment about Alira's human blood being unfit for the throne, said with a smile meant to sound like a joke. The room laughed politely. Alira kept her eyes on her plate, used to swallowing worse insults during her years tending the sick and the poor of Ashwick Hollow. Draven did not laugh. He rose from his seat so quickly that his chair scraped against the stone floor, and the look on his face silenced the entire hall. He said nothing loud, nothing dramatic, only a few low words to Merrick that made the older man go pale and excuse himself from the table without finishing his meal. When Draven sat back down, his jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. "You didn't have to do that," Alira said quietly, once the conversation resumed around them. "Yes," Draven said, "I did." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that frightened her more than his temper ever could. It looked like devotion. It looked like a man protecting something he had waited a long time to have. That night, she asked Chaol the question she had been avoiding for weeks. "Why does he treat me this way? We are strangers, bound by a treaty. He owes me nothing beyond civility." Chaol hesitated, glancing toward the corridor as though checking for listeners. "There is a story," he said finally, "that most in this court know but rarely speak of. Years ago, before the king's father died, a seer came to Blackthorn Ridge. She told the old king that his son's true mate would come from beyond the border, marked by a healer's hands and a healer's heart. Draven was young then, and skeptical, but the words stayed with him. When your name crossed the border with the council's offer, he recognized it. He had heard your mother's name spoken with reverence by traders who'd been healed in Ashwick Hollow. He knew, before you ever passed through our gates, who you were to him." Alira felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Are you saying he agreed to this marriage because of a prophecy? That he's known this whole time, and said nothing?" "He agreed to the marriage to prevent a war," Chaol said carefully. "But yes, he also agreed because he believed, somewhere in his heart, that fate had already chosen you for him. He did not tell you, because he did not want you to feel forced into something you should be free to choose for yourself." Alira did not sleep that night. She sat by her window and stared out at the dark mountains, torn between fury and something softer she didn't want to name. She had come here believing her choice to save her brother was the only choice that mattered. Now she wondered how much of her life since had been shaped by a prophecy she'd never been told about, a fate written before she'd even had the chance to decide for herself. The next morning, she found Draven alone in the garden and demanded the truth. He did not deny it. He told her everything, plainly, without excuses. He told her about the seer's words, about the years he had spent wondering if they were true, about the moment he heard her name and felt something settle in his chest that he couldn't explain. He told her that he had agreed to the political marriage because it was the only way to have her without forcing her hand, and that every kindness he had shown her since had been real, prophecy or not. "I should have told you sooner," he admitted. "I was afraid that if you knew, you would see yourself as something owed to fate instead of a woman making her own choice. I did not want that for you." "You still took that choice from me," Alira said, her voice trembling. "Whether you meant to or not." "Then take it back," Draven said quietly. "I release you from anything you feel you owe this marriage, this crown, or me. If you wish to return to Ashwick Hollow, I will see you home safely myself, and I will find another way to keep the peace." Alira had no answer for him. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone among the winter roses, and for 3 days, she barely spoke to anyone at all. On the 4th day, the attack came. Rogue wolves from a rival pack, sensing weakness in a king, distracted by matters of the heart, struck the border town of Ashwick Hollow itself. Word reached the castle at dawn, and Draven was already in armor before the messenger finished speaking. Elira did not think. She grabbed her healer's satchel and ran for the stables, refusing every order to stay behind. "You cannot go into danger," Draven told her, blocking her path with his body. "That is my home," Elira said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Those are my people. I am not asking your permission." Something in his expression broke, and he stepped aside. The battle at Ashwick Hollow was brutal and fast. Wolves and soldiers clashing in the streets Elira had known since childhood. She did not fight. She knelt beside the wounded, human and wolf alike, her hands moving with the same steady skill her mother had taught her, stitching wounds, setting bones, offering comfort where medicine could not reach. She saw Draven fighting not as a king defending territory, but as a man protecting a town that mattered to his wife, and by extension, to him. When the last of the rogue wolves fled into the hills, the battlefield fell into an exhausted, grief-heavy quiet. Elira knelt in the mud beside a young Blackthorn soldier, pressing a cloth to his wound, when she felt Draven's shadow fall over her. He knelt down across from her, ignoring the blood and dirt, and waited until she looked up. "I did not come here as a king today," he said. "I came because I could not bear the thought of losing you before I ever had the chance to earn you honestly. The prophecy brought your name to me, but everything since, every quiet night in the library, every cup of tea, every moment I have wanted to protect you, that has been real, that has been mine to choose, and I chose you, every single day." Elira looked at the town around her, half in ruins but still standing, still hers, still saved. She looked at the man kneeling in the mud before her, a king who had ridden into danger not for duty, but for love. "I did not want to be chosen by fate," she said quietly. "I wanted to choose for myself." "Then choose," Draven said. "Choose me, or don't. I will accept whatever answer you give." Elira reached out and took his bloodied hand in hers, the same hands that had stitched wounds and steadied trembling patients her whole life, and for the first time since crossing the border, she felt no fear at all. "I choose you," she said, "not because of any prophecy. Because of every quiet night, every kindness, every moment you proved yourself to me without asking anything in return." In the weeks that followed, the two kingdoms forged a peace that no treaty could have written, built instead on a healer's steady hands and a king's patient heart. Elira became the first human ever fully embraced by the Blackthorn pack, not as a hostage to their peace, but as its truest symbol. She had come to Blackthorn Ridge, believing she was trading her freedom for her brother's safety. She left having found a home, a purpose, and a king who had waited years to love her honestly, long before she ever knew his name.